service of the year. To your neighbor, say it's so good to see you. And of course, those online, we miss you very much. We can't wait for you to be here. How many of you really enjoyed the live worship today? Didn't the worship team do such a great job? Let's give them a big round of applause. Woo! Okay, so today the title of my message is By Goal Setting, Hello Habit Stacking. I know, right? Some of you have been waiting. What is the first message of the year going to be? How are we going to set our 2021? So here we are. We're going to say goodbye to our goal setting, but we're going to say hello to habits, okay? So you ready for my message? All right. So there is a term in cognitive theory called functional fixedness. And it was coined by a German psychologist, and his name is Carl Friedrich Duncker, and he coined this term in 1930. Now, basically, the idea that Duncker posits is that human beings, we have this tendency to fixate on what he calls, I quote him, the common functions of objects or situations. Okay, so for example, to bring this to life to you, for example, how of you know the Titanic, right? So the Titanic in April 1912, during its maiden voyage, okay, it hits a large iceberg. You guys know, right? It was on its way from England all the way to New York City, and in the middle of the ocean, it hits a huge iceberg, and 1,500 people perish. So Duncker, in his work, argues that in reality, more lives could have been saved during that disaster. Because between the actual collision and the sinking of the Titanic, it actually took 2 hours and 30 minutes. And in fact, there was actually more than enough time for the Titanic to pull up onto the iceberg so that it wouldn't sink. But because everyone was so fixated on the fact that icebergs sink ships, they were so focused on the crisis that was in front of them that people became rigid in their thinking. So much so that they couldn't see outside of the traditional response of evacuating the ship and getting everyone onto a lifeboat. They couldn't see the iceberg itself as an option to save lives. That a huge ship could actually pull up onto a huger iceberg and the iceberg would not sink. Amen? So listen, we're in a state of prolonged crisis at this point, right? And it's not just a season of pressure, but it's a season of unpredictability. And really what happens in crisis is human beings, we start to have two responses, okay? One is, as Duncker posits, we are unable to look beyond the function of a pandemic. So our focus becomes the pressure, the unpredictability, and all our energy as a human being is spent in response to that crisis. And that takes away from our ability to imagine a positive, promising future. Now, the second thing that happens in a crisis is because it's also unpredictable, right? Human beings under unpredictability actually tend to become rigid in our thinking. So the more changes come down the pipeline, the more this vaccine works, that vaccine doesn't work. If we haven't pre-pandemic trained ourselves to be mindful and adaptable people, what will happen is we will tend to react to the environment around us and default to whatever is safe, which is usually our past, which is usually what's the safest way to recreate stability in our lives. And so what happens is our brains have trouble thinking creatively. So it's hard, I'm sure many of you have found this year in 2021, right? It's really hard to figure out how to make good resolutions. It's hard to decide how we're going to create momentum and drive and certainty. You know, we need certainty to go forward, right? So it's hard to figure those things out for our future. And that's what I want to focus on today with you, all right? I want to give you some principles that will help you to stay flexible and adaptable in an unpredictable environment. I want to teach you how to live indifferent to the external pressures that you and I cannot control this year. And I want to teach you how we can get focused on the long game of our life and future instead of being short-term reactive to whatever happens in 2021. Does that sound good? Okay, so first principle, are you ready? The first principle I have for you is set a trajectory instead of a resolution. Now listen, I don't have much issue with the general concept and idea of making resolutions, okay? Except for the fact that I do find resolutions too resolute. You see, most of the time, when we create a resolution, it tends to look more like a goal or a destination. You know, this year I'm going to do this. This year I'm going to achieve that. And the focus really when we make a resolution tends to be result-based outcomes. For example, I'm going to make this certain amount of money. I'm going to get this certain sort of grades for school this year. And what I found over the years is that this sort of outcome-based resolutions, they are only great when circumstances are stable. So, for example, right, when it comes to church growth, right, attendance goals in church, right, when it is a normal year, where 80% of our year is certain and only 20% is not, then listen, projecting attendance and targets is really easy for us. It's almost like clockwork, automatic. August to September, our attendance always picks up. December, Christmas rolls down and we explode. And then we know from previous years, right? You know, we can gauge, you know, how many new friends are going to come from ECG, how many people are going to turn up. And then January, when school reopens, we do Let's Be Friends. And then Easter rolls around, and then Easter slows down, and then we go into training season, and then we repeat. So it's predictable. Our resolutions and projected outcomes become predictable as well. But when it's not predictable, resolutions are a whole other story. Now, I've also found that outcome-based resolutions are also good for simple stuff. So, for example, if you say, in 2021, I'm going to try bungee jumping, or I'm going to read one book. I know some of you are going, but that's not simple. Right, so if it's just those simple goals, it is easy to keep. But if your resolution is, I'm going to lose weight or eat healthy, then good luck. That might be on your resolution list for many years before it actually happens. Why? Because that particular resolution requires you to overhaul the whole way you live your life. You got to learn new eating habits. You've got to find new sources of nourishment. Right? You've got to learn what diet suits your body, what kind of exercises work for you. You've got to do the work of creating habits that make that goal happen. You see, outcome-based resolutions are harder to keep when things are complicated. So I have found over the years it's really important, right, how we frame and create and define our resolutions. So over the last couple of years, you realize in our church, instead of talking about goals and destination, we've done things like Jibe 2020, right? Where we ask you, what and how are you going to do joy in your life in 2020? We've done things like possibility in 2019. What are you possibly going to try to attempt in 2019? And guess what? We found the success rate of your resolutions actually goes up. You get better results than outcome-based resolutions. You see, what are we doing when we change your definition of how we set goals and resolve to do things? We're actually helping you guys to set trajectories instead of resolutions. We're helping you form a vision and direction that you are excited about, instead of merely chasing goal after goal, destination after destination. And so that is what we call here in the evolution trajectory. Yes. Right? Turn to your neighbor, say trajectory. Trajectory. So the word trajectory is a word I associate most with space travel. Right? It's used to describe the movements of planets. It's also used to describe the path of a space shuttle on its mission. You see, the reason places like NASA use the word trajectory is because when it comes to space, the great unknown, it is incredibly hard to plot a rigid blow-by-blow plan when it comes to reaching a destination. Space is simply too vast and the journey is just way too complicated. So instead, space shuttles follow a trajectory. They also use another more technical term called telemetry. Telemetry refers to an angle, or more accurately, the arc of direction and force, which a spaceship will try their best to keep aligning to that trajectory, that telemetry, that flight plan, as they hurtle off into the unknown in hopes of reaching a dream. But that's why I also love the metaphor, the idea of trajectory, because it's not just a rigid destination or goal. The goal for NASA is never just to reach Mars, right? It's the vision and the idea and the dream of being the first to land on Mars, to explore and adapt to the rigors of the journey there. It's the dream of a milestone in human exploration of our universe. And I think it so beautifully describes what the journey of our lives is really like, right? And that is, we all need, first and foremost, a captivating hope for our future. You see, here's one of my favorite verses, Proverbs 28:18. It says, where there is no vision, people perish. You see, you and me, right, guys, human beings, we need more than just resolutions or resolve in order to live our lives. We need hope. We need motivation. We need passion. We need excitement. We need to feel like there's going to be a payoff for all that we are pursuing in life. You see, no human being achieves great results, at least not on a consistent basis, if they are not excited about the future that they are striving for. So my advice to you this year, is don't live your life in reaction to the negative. You see, the crew of the people of the Titanic, they were so focused on the reality of how icebergs were sinking ships back in the 1700s that they couldn't see the creative potential of the iceberg that hit them. So listen to me, in this pandemic, yes, take care of your mental health. Slow down when you need to slow down. But don't become so focused on the fact that this pandemic is stealing your life and your time that you are blind to the potential right in front of you. Don't get so fixated that it is stalling your career, stalling your life, that you miss the opportunity that's right in front of you. So friend, listen, the first element of a great trajectory is vision. Because a bigger vision, it helps you to stop looking at the immediate situation in front of you as only negative. It helps you to break Dunker's functional fixedness so that you can think outside the box and be creative. So listen, vision in our lives doesn't have to be some lofty thing. A vision is really simply a picture that inspires hope, that motivates you to keep moving forward. So this January, guys, I want to encourage you, take time. It's okay to slow down. It's okay that today, second week, you still don't know what you want to do with 21. It's okay. Take your time to pray. Take your time to hear from God. Because you are going to need a trajectory, a vision to help you navigate the pressure of 2021. But here's the second reason why vision is also important to trajectory. Is that all right? And that is because you need it in order to chart a direction. So same verse in the Message Bible, it says, if people can't see what God is doing, they stumble all over themselves. You see, if you don't have a vision, you can't chart a direction, much less plan a path. You see, vision is what gives us a point B to our lives. And you need a point A and a point B in order to chart a direction. That is when you get a trajectory. But here's the important part I also want to bring across, okay? Which is the second half of verse 18. It says, but when they attend to what God reveals, they are most blessed. So, once you have a vision, once you set a trajectory, great. But now listen, there's a correct way in which to relate to the plans that we have for our future. The Bible tells us we're told to attend to. That means to pay attention to. You know, these two phrases, attend to, pay attention to, they're becoming some of my favorite phrases from last year. Because we've been talking about that, pay attention to in terms of our relationship with God. We've been talking about attending to in terms of our relationship with ourselves, our self-awareness. We've been talking about pay attention to when it comes to our relationship with people. But listen, paying attention and attending to is also such a great way to describe what happens as we travel along our trajectory. You see, trajectory is not about carving out a rigid path and to make sure we do every single step, A, B, C, D, E, all the way to Z, in order to get the outcome that we want. Instead, the pursuit of our dreams, guys, is more like really a space shuttle hurtling off into both the known and the unknown, towards that milestone or milestones that we are hoping and praying for in our lives. And as we head off in the direction, we have to keep aligning ourselves to that flight path. And if there's an obstacle, we go around it and then we realign back to that flight path. We keep attending to that telemetry. We keep adjusting and adapting, and we keep going until we hit our dream. We've got to take an attitude, with regards to 2021 or any crisis in our life where, yes, we celebrate it when our plan works out and all our hoped for achievements happen, but we've also got to learn to celebrate the unexpected accomplishments that we have, that sometimes come in the form of unexpected rewards or unexpected victories from creatively overcoming unexpected challenges. You see, trajectory not only helps you to stay positive because it's a vision when times get hard, it is also a way to set a resolution without being too resolute. It helps us to be flexible in unpredictable situations. Now, how do you want to hear a great story? Now, we all enjoy streaming Netflix and Spotify and YouTube, amen? On our phones, on our laptops, right? But do you know that our ability to stream all those things today actually came out of an unexpected creative moment from Steve Jobs? You see, Steve Jobs had a trajectory for Apple. And that was, years ago, he wanted to find a way. His vision was to put a computer into the hands of every human being on the planet. But along the way to this vision, as he was fighting for this goal, he started to notice how much himself and his employees loved their music, but that it was always so inconvenient to lug around CDs and CD players. I know some of you don't remember a time that I remember a time like that, right? CD player that was this big, and then stacks of CDs, one per album. Are you here with me? And so he started to think, we're trying to make computers compact enough so every human being can have a personal computer. So why don't we create music compact enough so that we can carry it in our pocket wherever we go? And that was how, in 2001, the first iPod was born. So some tech historians call it the day Steve Jobs changed the digital world. Because from there, a few years later, iTunes came out. And then iCloud became a natural extension, and so did the iPhone. 20 years later, you and I can hardly remember a time where music and podcasts and streaming video did not exist. You see, he started with a vision. He charted a trajectory. And he kept aligning himself to that trajectory, but as he did, he was open to the creative opportunities that presented themselves. So Apple today looks very different from what he first imagined. All he could think about was a personal computer. But I think probably if he was still alive today, he would say Apple today is better than when he first imagined. So listen, chart a trajectory for your life, full of hope and possibility this year. But as you do, hold that resolution lightly. You don't need to know everything that's coming. Instead, just keep aligning to what you do know and what you can know. And embrace the unknown that comes along the way. You see, there's just one more verse that I love, right, that I've been meditating on this year. And it's Proverbs 4:18. It says, the way of the righteous is like morning light that gets brighter and brighter till it is full day. You see, one of the problems of human beings is we want clarity about everything immediately. But the truth of the matter is the Bible says even for the righteous, even those who hear from God, even those who live by His will and His plan and live by the prophetic in their lives, listen, our lives and journeys are more like morning light that gradually becomes brighter as the day goes by. So you may not end up exactly where you hoped in life, but stay flexible and adaptable. Because with God, it will end up better than you had hoped. So, first principle, set a trajectory instead of a resolution. Yes. Now, my next piece of advice to you, number 2, cut the pace. Don't let the pace cut you. So when I was in school, secondary school, JC, one of the things I occasionally did was cross-country running, okay? Because back then in my secondary school, our cross-country team was actually just starting out when I was in upper sec, and they were always short of people for the team. So often they would ask some of the basketballers to go for cross-country meets because obviously basketballers, we do a lot of running, okay? And this is where I learned that in team cross-country running, it is not always the best runner that is the most important, even though they may seem like the star. It is actually the pace setter, which is sometimes nicknamed the rabbit of the team. So, in fact, you know what? Many professional cross-country teams actually hire professional pace setters for their teams. And they pay them a lot of money to control the pace. And so very often, it is the pace setters who are captains of the cross-country team, even though they are not the star runner. They are not the fastest, but they are the leaders. They ensure that both the star runners and the support runners perform at their optimum for themselves as individuals, but also what is most effective for the team. So listen, that's another great advice to live by in 2021, all right? Cut your way in 2021. Don't let 2021 cut its way into you. You know what, friend? Decide who you want to be and how you want to live your life this year. You know, don't wait for COVID-19. Don't wait for vaccines. Don't wait for phases to come and go before you feel like you can decide on what you're going to do next. Just decide. What can you do? Now, I'm not talking about kicking against the tide. That's just really silly and ridiculous. Are you hearing me? To refuse. I will refuse to accept whatever is happening in this pandemic. Don't be dumb. What I mean is, cut what you want with what you can control. Go around what you can't control. And you know what? What you can't control, just ignore it and let it go. In fact, probably what I want to say to you is this year, try to be indifferent to the unpredictability. Try to be indifferent to the external pressures that are swirling around you as you cut your pace. See, Proverbs 4:25 in the Message Bible says, keep your eyes straight ahead and ignore all the sideshow distractions. So listen, ignore external distractions. In other words, don't waste your energy getting anxious about the things you can't control. Are you here with me? You know, I also want to say to you, ignore, interpersonal distractions this year. You know, don't get anxious about where you are in life compared to other people. Stop comparing yourself with how well I'm doing versus how other people are doing. Even the people who love you and accept who you are. Because sometimes in church you got great friends here, but you will still feel, why are they so stable? Why am I struggling with these issues, right? Listen, don't get distracted by those things. Also learn to ignore your internal distractions. Don't wonder about, am I good enough? Is my trajectory good enough? Listen, just get yourself to a calm, healthy indifference. Survey the lay of the land in 2021. Decide, okay, what can I control? What can I not control? And then cut a path that works for you. One that isn't dependent on whatever happens in 2021. You see, one of the details you will learn about running in competitions is this. The moment you focus on the competition around you, do you know that your body immediately starts to lose speed? Because your brain will start to transfer some of the energy used to concentrate on going fast, and it will turn the energy to the distraction. And so immediately, when people start to get anxious about their competitors, they lose speed. Interesting, right? So here's some of the studies that I've been reading this past week. I found out that when our brains go into anxiety mode, we actually start to have higher responsiveness to threats and lower responsiveness to rewards. That means when we are anxious, right, we start to go into irrational fight or flight or freeze, or there's a new one, fawn mode. And we also simultaneously become less motivated towards rewards. Other studies also show that when we think or say negative phrases like I cannot and I'm not good enough, the part of the brain where creativity and problem solving is starts to shut down. So it literally is what another verse in Proverbs says, as a man thinks, so he is. But instead, when we think positive phrases, we can do this, we can try this, we can attempt this, creativity in your brain starts to reactivate. And do you know that when we choose to problem solve instead of worry, scientists have found that it actually starts to buffer our brain against anxiety. So can I be honest? Did 2020 have its really hard moments for our leadership team? Definitely. A lot of times, right, because we are leaders, we're always going to be going in, taking care of people. So sometimes it doesn't occur to the people that follow us that we actually live normal lives. So let me tell you, in 2020, some in our leadership team faced challenges at home. Parents getting sick, having serious health problems. In 2020, some of our team dealt with job loss, just like any of you did. In 2020, some of us were working through mental health struggles. But despite all that, I have to say we had, at the Evolution, one of our best years as a team. Why? Well, very simply because of our roles and responsibilities as leaders. When in crisis, we have no choice but to solve problems because we're leading people. The responsibility kept a lot of us, our brains, in problem-solving mode. And that problem-solving mode helped to stave off a lot of anxiety and caused us to flourish creatively. In fact, I would venture to say, the ones of us doing best even among our leadership team were the ones who were most embedded in the problem-solving process for 2020. Now, not reactive problem-solving, but responsive, thoughtful problem-solving. You see, in 2020, our church didn't just do things in an anxious rush because I don't know what every church is doing phase 2 or phase 3 this way and posting about it that way. We didn't create solutions because, we're afraid people expect us to provide certain things or do certain things as a church and a leadership team. No, listen, each time a new rollout happened, each time a change happened, we went, okay, let's take a breath. Do we need to go with this or not? What is best for our church? What do we need? And each time, we created a solution accordingly. And that is how I want to encourage you to approach 2021. I can't control when the regulations change. Which means, this year, I thought this through, I can't fully control how fast our church grows in numbers. So I decided I'm not going to wait around hoping for regulations and the situations with church growth to change. Instead, I'm going to be indifferent to that for now. I'm not even going to waste anxiety over it, because anxiety is a waste of energy that could be used for something else. And here's the thing about anxiety, right? Anxiety is never rational. So being in a state of anxiety is never going to yield the best decisions or results that I am capable of. So again, instead, I am going to be indifferent. Instead, I'm going to control and do what I can control. So this year, for me, I'm going to focus on training leaders and preachers. Our team is focused on making our online presence more impactful and effective, beefing up our content and the effectiveness of our reputation as a church. Because rather than fighting with what we can't control, we've decided, let's just set a trajectory and make the best use of our energy. We're going to cut the pace instead of letting the pace cut us. So this year, I want to encourage you, do that for yourself. Ask yourself, how can I plan my actions this year so that I cut the pace instead of the other way around? So that I cut the pace instead of letting my job cut me, or the world cut me, or the regulations cut me. And since, listen, some things in your life this year are going to be in slow down mode that you cannot do anything about, then what are other things you can develop instead? Maybe this year for some of you, it's a good time to get the therapy that you need to work out those issues while you're waiting for that career or that relationship that you want. So that when you do get those things, you're able to keep it and not lose it. Maybe this year you are in a phase of life where you wanted to figure out who you are and what you want to do with your future, but the opportunities are limited. Stop getting depressed over being stuck. Instead, embrace what opportunities are right in front of you. You might just discover something new about yourself that you never fathomed before. You see, stop fixating on the situation that you can't fix, asking yourself why, and instead, like Regina said a few weeks ago, ask yourself what? What can I cut? So, principle 2, cut the pace. Don't let the pace cut you. Finally, new idea I want to introduce to our church, along with a book. Is that all right? And the third thing is habit stack instead of goal set. So this idea comes from a #1 New York Times best-selling book called Atomic Habits, and it's by this guy named James Clear. And the basic premise is this: if you want to change who you are and your outcomes in life, don't create more goals. Instead, change your habits. You see, goals are the results you want to achieve, but habits are the systems and processes that lead you to those results. In fact, he says this in his book: if you want to predict where you're going to end up in life, just follow the compounding effect of your habits. In fact, he says something really harsh in his book. Can I read this to you? Whew. Your outcomes are a lagging measure of your habits. Your net worth is a lagging measure of your financial habits. Your weight is a lagging measure of your eating habits. Your knowledge is a lagging measure of your learning habits. Your clutter is a lagging measure of your cleaning habits. You get what you repeat. Ouch. Ouch, but true. Listen, this year, I want to challenge all of us, right? Continue to have trajectories. They are what motivates us, what gives us direction. Continue to cut the pace. Don't waste time waiting for things to happen or reacting to what happens around you. Instead, decide what you want to do and how you're going to respond. But most of all, in 2021, I want to encourage you, start making habit stacking the way you turn your life into the trajectory and pace that you want for yourself. I know, right? Habit stacking doesn't sound like the sexiest thing in the world, which is why so many of us are so bad at it. Right? Now, listen, but here's the interesting thing, right? We are bad at habit setting for a reason, okay? And this is why. Breakthroughs only happen after prolonged periods of an invisible buildup. Let me repeat. Breakthroughs only happen after prolonged periods of an invisible buildup in our lives. So let me say this. Seeing our church cut through 2020 like it was nothing. You know, a lot of people, pastors, other people, say to me, wow, man, you are so lucky. Your youth are so talented. You know, you just somehow have all these great people I don't have. Now listen, I love the compliment because I love our people getting praised. But sometimes this is almost a little bit annoying because they're praising our breakthrough like we didn't earn our breakthrough. You see, our ability to cut through last year, to see things like, for example, our theater and ops teams pull off the services, the gatherings, the Christmas that we had, it's been years of training and mentoring and discipline. You see, James Clear calls this the plateau of latent potential. You see, this is the paradox of habit building. When we first start creating a habit, we don't really see any tangible results or breakthroughs. In fact, we have this perception that habit building and results should look like this straight bar up. But really, it's actually more like a curve. And between our expectations of what's going to happen and what actually happens is this valley, this gap of disappointment. And this is the period where most people give up on their habits and their resolutions. So, for example, let me give you a very, very real life example, young adults here, right? When it comes to money, many studies show many young adults actually start off pretty well. They graduate, they start to save money regularly, they don't spend too much. But then after a couple of years, when it doesn't feel like the saving is paying off, because the bank account is okay, it's growing, but you know, it's just okay, right? It's not wow. Then they start to give up on the habit of saving. They start to spend more indiscriminately. Why? Because things and holidays and good food have a bigger, more immediate payoff than slow growing savings accounts. But here's the thing, right? Habit building is a double-edged sword. Because just as how good saving habits feel invisible until their breakthrough point, bad spending habits have the same curve. So it feels like not saving so much isn't affecting your life. Spending a little bit more isn't affecting your life that much. And then suddenly it escalates. So when you finally break through, people will always call it either an overnight success or an overnight collapse. Are you here with me? Listen, wherever you want to go in life, you do not rise to the level of your goals. You actually fall to the level of your systems. And that is your habits. See, Proverbs 4:26 in the Message Bible says, watch your step, and the road will stretch out smooth before you. Let me recontextualize this for our message today. Is that all right? Watch your habits, and the outcome will stretch out before you. You see, for the last couple of years, what I've tried to do in my life is to create habits instead of setting goals. See, we've been even trying to slowly shift our people work instead of having goals where we suddenly sprint for Christmas. We want to bring 50 new friends, right? Before the pandemic, we started to say to leaders, hey, get your people into a habit of bringing at least 1 or 2 or 3 new friends per CG every single weekend, depending on the size and capacity of your CG. Because at the end of the day, we don't rise to the level of our goals. If not, listen, every year our Christmas, our Easter explodes. We should be the 500, 600 church already. But the problem is we don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our habits. So for myself personally, I've tried to, really take care of my habits rather than my goals. Now here's another tip. I don't try to build too many habits all at the same time. Because you see, human beings, especially when we're in crisis, it's too hard to change every single thing at once. We do better by changing one or two things at a time. And that is why I'm calling it not habit building, but habit stacking. You see, this year, start with a habit that is specific. Something that you feel motivated to do. Something that is easy enough, but you will still get satisfaction from when you accomplish it. Right? Sometimes we set habits that are just too lofty, it never happens. Right? So, for example, maybe your long-term trajectory is getting healthy. Don't suddenly go, wow, I am going to cut my diet, I'm going to keto, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, if it's not who you are. Start with something small and specific. For example, you know what? I will eat from the healthy stores that I like 5 days a week. I will have fast food only once a week. So you still have your little sin. So achievable, but still very satisfying. You went from eating fast food 3 times a week to 1. Okay? So then do it, repeat until it becomes automatic. Then when that first habit is conquered, take it one step further, where you go, okay, you know what, I'm going to start to learn to calorie count and reach maybe 70% success every week. And I'm going to make it a habit to plan my meals in the morning using an app, repeat until it becomes automatic. Then once that happens, now I'm going to start to learn what diet and exercise works for my body, and I'm going to try adjusting to see if I can head towards there. And then I'm going to repeat it enough times that it becomes automatic. You see, you can do the same thing with school, the same thing with growing your knowledge and abilities and skills at work, the same thing with your leadership. So I have a list of things I want to accomplish. Some are responsibilities, some are passions, and what I do is, one by one, I start designing little habits to get closer to these things. Because listen, you will never accomplish all of them at once. But I keep building and stacking those habits one on top of the other, and I keep creating small wins so that I'm motivated to keep doing it, to keep heading into the trajectory I want for my life. You see, here's the thing you got to remember, right, guys? Who you are, who you want to become, it's a long game, not a short game. Goals are great for short gains. But who you are becoming, that is a long game. Learn to play the long game and not the short game of your life. Here's another interesting thing, right, that James Clear points out in his work. And he says there is a huge difference between outcome-based habit setting and identity-based habit building. You see, outcome-based is things like short-term, I want to lose 20 kg. Identity-based is I want to be healthy and feel good about myself, to stop worrying about my health and my future. Outcome-based is I'm going to go to therapy so I stop feeling bad about a particular breakup or a bad situation at work. Identity-based is I'm going to therapy because I want to become someone who is healthy in my relationships, in my mental and emotional maturity, so that I'm not held back from my best life. Outcome-based is I want to get good results in school so that I can get the job that I want. Identity-based is I want to be someone who works hard and is always learning and growing. So this is what James Clear found. He said, if we want to become better at something, it is far more important to prove our identity to ourselves than to get results. It turns out that when we set resolutions that are about our identity versus just profit margins, they actually become more motivating for us to change. And the long-term impact on our lives and careers and callings becomes way more substantial down the line. So this year, and I really do feel like I've repeated this over and over again the past few years, don't just focus on your outcomes. Don't just focus on what you want to achieve. Instead, focus your habit stacking on who you want to become. Stop worrying about the immediate results and start working out your identity. Become the type of person who can achieve the results that you want to achieve. So say goodbye to short-term, shallow, goal-oriented thinking. And start to welcome habits that build you towards God's calling over your life. Amen? So listen, let's repeat. For 2021, set a trajectory, cut the pace, and habit stack. But here's one crucial question I need to also pose to you for 2021 to make this all complete and wholesome. Is that okay? And that is, I want you to ask yourself, in 2021 and beyond, who does God want you to be? Whenever I start a new year, I always take time to go back and review the previous year. I always go back to look at, Jive 2020 and Possibilities 2019, because I want to remember and review, the previous time God spoke to me about who He wants me to become. So today we talked about vision and trajectory in a very secular, pragmatic way, right? But the fact of the matter is the greatest trajectory for our future is the identity God designed you for. And every time we seek Him about our calling, every time we pray about our resolutions for the coming year, God is always cluing us in on who we are and who we're supposed to be becoming. Right? But oftentimes, what happens is we set a resolution, we set a vision and a trajectory, but it gets lost in our anxiety, lost in our ego, lost in our distractions. It gets lost, especially in 2020, in the pressures of life and the unpredictability of circumstances. And we start to lose ourselves to the outcomes. So always remember this, is in Proverbs 16:9 says, people can plan their path, but it's the Lord who secures our steps. We can plan our trajectories, but ultimately it is God who establishes us. And so the thing we need to concern ourselves with most in life is, are we aligning with who God asked us to be and become? Are we aligning with the person that maybe in 2020 He asked you to become, in 2019 He asked you to try? So for some of us here, I want to say this, this year, maybe last year was really distracting for you. You weren't ready capacity-wise for a pandemic. You weren't ready for the level of pressure. And so maybe you set some really great resolutions in July 2020, but you never got around to it. Well, then change it up this year. I want to say to you, make space for God to be God in your life. Because really, I have this feeling, when I pray that 2020 became a little bit, it's never ever fully wasted, but a little bit of a wasted year, not because you didn't have potential, but because out of pressure, you cut God out of your life. Are you here with me? Yes. Friend, life is so much better when it's God who is securing your steps. Now, for some of us here, my word to you this year is, don't live your year worrying about whether you're succeeding. Instead, just focus on who God says you are. Don't let pressure and anxiety cut your pace. Just run the pace God has for you, not someone else, but you. Also learn to rely on the pace of your team, the pace setters that God has placed in your life around you. You see, I found also in 2020, as I watch people, what tends to happen when some of us get anxious is we start to isolate. And we start to want to live by our own values. We start to want to solve our problems by ourselves. Or maybe it's out of a good heart, like you don't want to hold other people around you back. But here's the thing. God put us in relationship for a reason. God put you in a church and a team for a reason. So that when you are tired, Someone else can help you set the pace. Someone else can come alongside you and support you. Are you here with me? So if that's what you did in 2020, I want to encourage you in 2021. No, surround yourself with great relationships. Now, finally, my last thing is to many of the leaders here, and for some of you here whom you can feel in your spirit this year, God is calling you to rise. Amen. To rise and to get ambitious. Listen, what we achieve in life is never dependent on the external. It is always dependent on the internal. So I want to encourage you that even in 2021, even though it will still be somewhat uncertain, probably not as bad as last year, but it will still be uncertain, right? Leaders, you can still set a trajectory, and we can still cut a pace, and we can still play the long game here at the Evolution. It doesn't matter whether or not we grow to a certain number this year. It matters that we become people whom growth is who we are. Because that means that whether times are good or times are bad, year after year, we will grow as God wills us to grow. Are you here with me? So I want to encourage you guys, this year in 2021, be flexible in the unpredictability. Learn to be strong and indifferent to the pressures that come your way. And learn to be ambitious anyway. You don't have to hit a certain goal, a certain mark, but be ambitious about who you are becoming. And the rest of those things, they will follow as life comes along. Amen.